read a psalm and then turn around and talk to the Lord and pray to Him. It's a wonderful discipline in our spiritual walk. Psalm 33:12, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. The church has to talk about government because government was instituted by God. We talk about the family. There are some preachers who don't want to talk about government. They say, church is state and they shouldn't deal with government issues. Well, that doesn't make sense. God established the family. We talk about families. I don't know of a pastor anywhere that doesn't talk about families. God established the church. We talk about the church. God established government, so we talk about government. And when it comes time to understand our government, we must be sure that we're speaking to it and it's now speaking to us. Don't bring your politics into the church. Bring your church into your politics. And when we want to understand the role of the United States before God, you don't have to be original in your thinking. We're going to look at what our founding fathers said. Of the 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence, over 50 of them loved Jesus Christ as much as you and I do. Now, Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, who were not Christians, they get all the press, people who are secular and don't like to talk about our Christian roots. They make sure that they talk about Franklin and Jefferson. Of the 56 men, at least 50 of them loved Jesus just as much as you and I do. Regular churchgoers, attended church. So the Declaration of Independence, which has no authority over us at all, is not a government edict. It is merely an essay. It is just an opinion, a white paper, if you will, that some men put together to try to understand what was God's dealings with this new country that was being born. It's very important that you understand that. This is not like the Constitution of the United States, which has authority. This is not like some edict that comes from the House of Representatives or from the United States Senate. This is just an essay some men put together that has no authority at all. The only time in the history of our country that the Declaration of Independence has had any authority was under Abraham Lincoln when he broke the Constitution. As you know, if you're a history student, you know that Lincoln at times ignored the Constitution because he felt the country was more important than the Constitution, and he had to save the country. And he was the only one who ever took the Declaration of Independence and turned it into a political, powerful treatise. It was actually just a statement. It was an opinion by some men on why were they going to rebel against King George. And in doing so, by the time they got done, not only was it a statement regarding why they were going to rebel against King George, it became an important religious document because, once again, it had no authority, so they didn't have to worry about the Constitution, about infringing on church and state. They were just making some statements. And so it's very interesting. Our Declaration of Independence from Britain is a statement, a declaration of dependence on God. Very interesting. You could call it the Declaration of Dependence and be just as accurate as to call it the Declaration of Independence. It refers to God 4 times, and it's good for us in our era, 250 years later, to look back at these religious men and what they were saying about what they hoped this country would be, to take Scripture, to take the look from this era and look back and just analyze what these 50-plus men who love the Lord, what they saw as the role of government and how they thought that government had to depend upon God. So we're going to look at the 4 statements in the Declaration of Dependence about God. Number 1, they said that God was the lawmaker. They said that they were trying to rise to the equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them. These 56 men knew they had been wronged, but they didn't know what law they could use to rebel against the king. How do you put a king on trial? How do you find him guilty? How do you put him in a court of law? All of their charters had been revoked. The British Constitution and common law said that the king was king indeed. He's essentially sovereign. And so here are these men on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. They're not anarchists. They're not trying to have no government at all. They want to legitimize what they're doing. They want to explain to the world what they're doing. Therefore, they went back, way back in British history, and they reminded the world that British common law and the British Constitution were based on the Bible. In fact, common law, as defined by Blackstone's commentary, which the first 100 years of lawyers in our country studied, Blackstone said that common law was the laws of the Bible made practical and applied to everyday situations. That's what common law is. So our founding fathers, they said, okay, we can't put the king on trial. Parliament's not working with us, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to the original. And we're going to say that God gave us laws. And we're going to respond to the original lawgiver. God, not King George, is the lawmaker. In fact, when they voted on July 2, by the way, we celebrate July 4, but July 2 is the real anniversary of our independence. That's when they voted for independence. July 4 is when they adopted all the wording of the Declaration. It's in big letters at the top of the Declaration. That's why we celebrate July 4. But actually, July 2 is the day that we voted. And when we voted independence on July 2, Sam Adams, the father of the American Revolution, whose slogan for years had been, "No king but King Jesus," said, "We have this day restored the sovereign to whom alone men ought to be obedient. He reigns in heaven, and may his kingdom come." So they felt they were justified in rebelling against the king, Parliament, British Constitution, British law, because there was a greater lawmaker, and that lawmaker was God. Number two, the Declaration viewed God as the creator, and as the creator, the source of human rights. This is the most famous part of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These men felt that there were certain truths that you didn't have to debate. It's just self-evident. You don't even have to argue about them. Alexander Hamilton said that the sacred rights of people are not rummaged for back in old parchments or old records, but it's like a sunbeam. They're obvious, self-evident. And just to make sure that you knew what these 50-plus godly men saw as self-evident, they wrote them out. They wanted to make sure that you understood what they believed. And as we as Christians today look back on what they said, how do we feel about what they said? So they wrote them out. Here's what they believed. All men are created equal. Now, rhetoric was way ahead of reality. We'll come back to that in just a minute. They believed in the existence of God. All of them did. And they acknowledged his role as the creator. The idea, the very concept that all people are created equal is Christian and nothing else. No other religion in the world even claims to believe that all people are equal. None. Not one. And what they meant by this was that all people have equal dignity and worth before God. Nobody has the right to oppress another. It was not a reference to the equality of ability, talents, fortune, or wealth. It was a matter of political equality, that everybody stood before the government with equal rights before law and government. And our forebears, in their thinking, they saw themselves as fighting for principles that were true everywhere, all around the world. This is 1776. Now, you remember all through the 1800s, we believe that we're going to bring in the kingdom of Christ. I've preached to you about that. Almost all Christians in America in the 1800s were post-millennial. That means they believed the world was going to get better and better and better and better. And finally, when the world was perfect, Jesus would come. Post-millennialism. World War I destroyed it in the early 1900s. But from about 1776 to about 1914, 1918, right there, almost all Christians in America believed the world's going to get better and better and better, and that we were going to take these great truths that we had learned about democracy and about God loving everybody, we were going to take them to the whole world. That's why the 1800s are considered one of the greatest centuries of Christian history, because our missionaries went all over the world. Adoniram Judson, William Carey, Lottie Moon, all the greatest missionaries believed that they were making the world better, and Jesus was going to come when they made it great. That's what they believed. So these men believed that. Now, as is always the case, oratory was way ahead of reality. Men who owned no land were left out, along with women, slaves, Native Americans, Asians, Jews, Catholics, Muslims, and the list can go on and on and on and on. And so the quest of America for 250 years has been, okay, we've got these great words, all people are created equal, all men are created equal. Now, how do we make it real? How do we make it happen? And that is the struggle of the United States of America. We've always had this haunting us, hanging over our head. All people. So we go to a war, we have 700,000 of our people die, more than all of the world's wars combined, to make sure that African Americans have a chance, at least, to come up. Women, the suffrage movement, last 50 years or more, women pleading for the right to vote. Native Americans trying to find their position. The courts are still trying to let the Native Americans know that we know we stole their land. And the Asians, when they came, and we worked them to death on our worked them to death. They had such few rights. The Jews, who are still hated by so many. Catholics, who had to claw and fight and crawl to become accepted by the people of the United States. That's why Mr. Kennedy's election as president was so important. The Catholics finally felt that maybe they'd arrived. And Muslims, listen to me, folks. Look at my good eye right here. Look at my good eye. We're all so thrilled about the Supreme Court ruling about that coach being able to pray. Look at me, look at me, look at my good eye. Let me remind you what it means to be a Baptist. That means you're going to celebrate when a Muslim becomes a coach of a Church-Rogersville football team and he prays to Allah. That's what it means to be a Baptist. You believe in the same religious liberty for everybody, all of them. If a Buddhist becomes a coach of a volleyball team and wants to offer up incense to Buddha, it's okay. That's what you said if you celebrate the Supreme Court decision. Because the whole history of our country has been trying to reach this point. All are created equally. And as Baptists, our great contribution to this country was the First Amendment. That's us. That's the Baptist gift, the First Amendment. That's us. And so whenever we give a victory to ourselves, we have to share it with everybody else. So that's where it started, that all men are created equal. But then they said because they're created equal, God himself gives them certain rights, that the rights come from God. Government does not give rights. Governments protect rights. All the difference in the world. If governments can give you rights, they can take away rights. Governments they do not give you the right. The right is inalienable. It's self-evident. God has given you the right, so the government protects it. What were those three rights that they wanted to know you had more than anything else? Number one, life. Our founding fathers believed that the number one gift of God to humanity was they were to be allowed to live. They have the right to safety and security. That's why if someone kills a member of your family, the United States government and local governments pay the prosecution to try to find the person guilty. Because just think if you were really poor and a rich person killed one of your family, you have no money to hire a lawyer. You couldn't take them to court. So in this country, because we believe that the primal right is life, we pay the prosecutors. We pay the jurors. We make sure that life is protected from womb to tomb. We believe that life is unalienable. Number two, they believed that you should have liberty. Now, the idea of liberty meant you don't have to sit under a dictator, that you have the process to determine what government you live under. Not absolute freedom, but it's relative. It's always determined by the freedom of others, and you got to keep fighting. And George Washington and John Adams said that our country would never survive with an immoral people. We had to have all these different governments. We do not have a dictator, but what do we have? We have national government, state government, county government, city government, townships. We have churches. We have schools. We have families. We have all kinds of government, on us because we understand the depravity of human beings. We know that people are lost and undone without Christ. We just know that's why America has more inspectors than any country in the world, because we trust nobody. That's the American system. That's why we have a three-headed government. We trust nobody. That's the secret to success of our whole country, is that our liberty is not based on doing whatever we want to do, but it's based on the freedom to do what we ought to do. That we live within confines with all these different governments trying to keep us in line, including governing ourselves. And then, number 3, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Boy, the world would be a better place if Jefferson would have included a different word. If he'd have said what he meant, the pursuit of happenstance. That's what he meant. Happiness now means, being happy. That's not what the word meant when Jefferson wrote this. When Jefferson wrote this word, happiness meant happenstance, stuff that just happens to happen, haphazard things. So what they believed was you have the right to live, the right to liberty, and then the right to pursue opportunity. That's what this meant. It didn't mean you have the right to be happy, or it didn't mean that then. What it means is you have the right to use what you have to improve your position in life. John Locke, who is the grandfather of our system, he said you should have life, liberty, and property. Jefferson took property and said, well, let's go one step farther. You should not only have the right to possessions, you should be able to take what you have, use them in the right way so that you can go up in life. You can improve your station. It's the right of self-development. An individual has the right to control their future. They can choose their destiny, what they will become and what they will succeed. In America, there are no socially elite groups. There's no ladies, no lords, no nobles, no dukes, no princes, no princesses. You can rise. There's no royalty and non-royalty. You can rise up. You can come up. George Whitefield, the great preacher who preached all over the colonies before the Revolutionary War started, and who most historians believe without his preaching we could not have had America, because the colonists distrusted each other as much as they distrusted England until the Great Awakening. Under the preaching of Whitefield, there began to be a camaraderie up and down the colonies. Ben Franklin made his fortune publishing the sermons of George Whitefield. George Whitefield was always amazed when he would come to the colonies. In the rest of the world, the rich people pulled up when he'd preach. He'd stand up to preach out in the fields, wherever he'd preach. The rich people came in their carriages and their wagons, and they filled up right up here, right up against the platform. And then the common people were out there and couldn't even hardly see what was going on. In the colonies, it was the only place Whitefield ever traveled in the world where that the rich people left their horses, their wagons, and their carts out yonder, and everybody came equal before the preacher. That's the way our system was meant to be. Has it failed? Sure it has. Have we not done a great job? Of course not, because of the depravity of human beings. By the way, our public education system is built on our belief that people have the right to go up. That's the premise of our education system. We want every child to go to school because we believe that in their learning, they're being trained, they're being taught, they can go up the social ladder. Number 3, you ready? Number 1, God is the lawmaker. He's the creator, the source of our liberties. Now, number 3, He is the judge. The representatives were appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions. Their logic was flawless. Okay, if they were going to obey the laws of God, and if He's the creator and the one who gives us the right, then we'd better appeal to Him to make this thing work. Since we're trying to do it His way, we're going to ask Him to make sure it works. They believed they were doing the work of the Lord. John Adams and his New Englanders were as convinced as John Winthrop and his Pilgrims that the settlers of the New World had been called out to create a new government, a new thing. They believed that the colonies had a God-ordained task, and that if they did it right, the way He wanted them to, He would judge it favorably. Number 4. The Declaration viewed God as protector. They said They professed a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. They were rebelling against the strongest nation in the world, and they knew they needed a miracle. And to survive, they had to have a lot of them. The miracle at Dorchester Heights is one of the greatest miracles in the history of our country. The miracle at Brooklyn ranks right up there with Dorchester. And possibly the greatest miracle, all of these are in Peter Marshall's book, The Light and the Glory, one of the greatest books I ever read. And possibly the greatest miracle of all is when we discovered what Benedict Arnold was trying to do. Had Benedict Arnold succeeded, we would have lost the Revolutionary War. We could not have survived without West Point. Had he got it gone, we'd have lost the Hudson, we'd have lost the whole thing. And so after the war, because at the beginning of the war, they had asked God to protect them, to be good to them. After the war, after we had won, they decided that they would adopt a national seal that expressed their thanks to God for His protection. So get your dollar bills out. Here we go. By the way, any money that's taken out of a wallet during church should never be put back in it. This goes to the pastor at the end of church today. All right, that's a joke. No, if that were true, I'd ask you to pull out a 20. Okay. Ben Franklin, now let me set the stage for this. Ben Franklin wanted our seal to be the Bible image of Moses dividing the Red Sea. He wanted the motto of the United States to be, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. And even though he was a deist, Franklin had to confess God surely was no idle spectator when this nation was born. Jefferson also wanted a Bible image. He wanted the seal to picture Israel in the wilderness led by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Finally, they adopted the seal that's on the back of the $1 bill. Now turn to the back of the $1 bill. And on the left side, you'll see the reverse of the national seal. Now, on the right side, you see the famous side, the obverse. That's the most famous side. But on the other side, you see the back of the American seal. You see a pyramid, 13 layers, 13 colonies. And on top of that, you see the eye of God. It's a Masonic symbol, by the way. You see the eye of God being pictured looking down on the colonies. You see written above it, Anno Coeptis, which is Latin for He has favored our undertaking. And at the bottom of the pyramid, you see in Roman numerals 1776. So our founding fathers wanted forever the world to know that when the war started, they asked for His protection. And when it was over, they said, thank you. Don't ever forget that. In the Declaration of Dependence, our founding fathers described God as lawmaker, creator and source of rights, judge, and protector. In other words, they believed our country was the cause was God ordained, themselves God made, their rights God given, their intentions God vindicated, and their efforts God protected. We were like them when we adopted as our motto, in God we trust. We don't promote any religion. Christianity has no favoritism, but Buddhism, Islam, it's mainly, of course, since most people are of Christian persuasion or lean that way, we get a lot of advantage from that. But we speak in ways that we try to be careful. So we say, in God we trust. In our Pledge of Allegiance, we say, one nation under God. And we were honoring them when we began singing, God Bless America. Now, here's what's happening now. America is moving away from a spiritual understanding of who we are. Have we been perfect? Good grief, no. Our history of slavery, folks, don't try to explain it away. Don't try to say, well, it was just one of those things. It was sin. It was of hell. It was demonic and satanic. The way we treated the Native Americans, don't stand up and say, well, no, folks, we stole their land. Just deal with it. Just say it. The way we treated the Asians and the Catholics, the Jews, a Christian doesn't try to hem and haw and whine. A Christian looks in the mirror and says, we are sinners saved by grace. We were wrong. We were wrong. We were wrong. And you say it. But right now, there's a move away from the spiritual. The founding fathers believed that all the standards of right and wrong were determined in the past. This is very important. If you miss anything else I say, don't miss this. When the country was founded, we believed that right and wrong had already been decided in the past. And therefore, we lived looking back to see, is that right, wrong? Oh, is this right or wrong? We looked back mainly to the Bible. Now, we, in the majority, don't look back. Now, we decide for ourselves what's right or wrong. We decide if we're going to live together with somebody without being married. We decide if we're going to use curse words. We don't look to the past and let that determine who we are and who we are. We decide we're going to be racist. We don't look back and be reminded that we all come from the same seed. We all share the same blood. The Bible says we're one blood, all of us. The blackest to the whitest. We're one blood. We're all kin to each other. See, we believed that right and wrong was determined in the past, and therefore that gave us a commonality that kept us together. The moment that you turn this way and say, now I'm going to decide what's right and wrong, you no longer have commonality. You no longer have the common, and therefore the nation begins to scatter, and that's when you fall apart. And that's what we're doing now. We're choosing a different direction. We're choosing a different way of deciding right and wrong. And when we had the Declaration of Dependence on God, we built one of the greatest societies in history. Not the greatest. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we're perfect. No. But we at least began moving in a positive direction. Now, what we're doing now is very dangerous. Immorality is increasing, more self-centeredness, more addiction to our own passions, and this losing of the commonality of the culture. We're all very different. And that causes us not to be a nation. A nation is common. That's what makes it a nation. You have people sharing common values. And so we're scattering, floating around. Will Durant, who's a famous philosopher, historian, said, the greatest question of our time is not communism versus individualism, not Europe versus America, not even East versus West. It is whether men can bear to live without God. The 20th century was a century of atheism. In the 20th century, atheism killed more people in wars than have been killed in all the religious wars of history combined. All of them. What the communists did in Russia, China, what Hitler did, what happened in World War I, atheism killed more people in one century, the 20th century, than all the wars of religion combined. Every time you hear somebody say to the Christians, well, you caused the Crusades, you all started World War I. Anytime somebody says to you, look at all the religion, the battles that have been fought for religion, just look them right in the eye and say, add them all up. Go all the way back to the creation of the world. Go all the way back. Add them all up. And they pale in comparison to what atheism did in the 1900s, in one century. Our founding fathers said, we don't think we can live without God. Now we've come to the point where we're going to have to answer the question, can we? Do I know what the future holds? I do not. Will America last forever? No. No nation lasts forever. None. It will not. Can we help it live a little longer? I hope so. I think so. So listen to these 50 godly men. Listen to what they said. Hear the echo. Lawmaker, creator, source of rights, judge, protector, no king but King Jesus. I know at Coeptus he has favored our undertakings. I believe America still needs God. And blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. All right. That's enough for today. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. Bow our heads.